We're going to start this.
How would it make a big difference?
Kevin Korb is here to present. He's speaking on the ethics of AI and is the head. You're the head of the chair of the Computational Intelligence Society of IEEE. Is that in Australia or Melbourne?
This is Victoria.
This is Victoria. Okay.
So if you're interested in, I don't have the sign-up sheet because I'm not that organized, but if you're actually interested in computational intelligence, which I suppose at least some of you would be, you can email me and we can talk about possibly hooking up with the society.
I can put the details on the website as well if you need. So here's Kevin Korb.
Thank you. So hopefully this has been an interesting summit, of which I've missed all but the last few seconds, and will miss everything I'm not attending this evening, in fact. I gather from the schedule there's been a debate about dystopia and utopia and technology, AI, nanotechnology, all of those good things. And no doubt many of you here are optimists, and no doubt some of you are pessimists. So my presentation today depends on a certain amount of optimism. I'll explain now just how much optimism that is. Over the last 5 years, almost every advance in climate science has painted a more disturbing picture of the future. The reluctant conclusion of the most eminent climate scientists is that the world is now on a path to a very unpleasant future, and it is too late to stop it. Behind the facade of scientific detachment, the climate scientists themselves now evince a mood of barely suppressed panic. No one is willing to say publicly what the climate science is telling us, that we can no longer prevent global warming, that will this century bring about a radically transformed world that is much more hostile to the survival and flourishing of life. As I will show, this is no longer an expectation of what might happen if we do not act soon. This will happen. I believe that. I read this a couple of days ago, having picked up Clive Hamilton's most recent book in the bookshop. The Malthusian implications of population growth, combined with a universal desire to live the happy life of Western industrialized nations. The Malthusian implications of that combination have been clear since at least the computer simulations at the Club of Rome in the 1970s. It doesn't really take global warming to see the problem. 8 billion or more humans on the Earth living it up in that way is not sustainable, even if global warming were in fact entirely fictitious. So I say those things because they were actually instrumental in my turning to AI research around 1990. I left a job in Silicon Valley where I was making a heap of money with the hope that AI might be applied to some of these problems. I still have that hope, but it is not as sanguine as the hopes of, say, Ray Kurzweil. I do not have the belief that AI is imminent. My belief is rather that it is going to be, if it occurs, a long, hard slog. Anyway, to details. What on earth is artificial intelligence? Whatever it isn't what AI researchers in the 60s and 70s were so impressed by, expert systems. The AI summer of 1980 was all about capitalizing on recent advances in the technology to launch Silicon Valley startup companies with heaps and heaps of venture capital in order to make heaps and heaps of money. That was shortly thereafter followed by the AI winter of the early 1980s, when those companies collapsed. Those companies were promoting old-style expert systems, which were primarily characterized by restricted domains of activity, by an inability to learn, to adapt to a changing environment, by a notable lack of autonomy, the requirement that so-called knowledge engineers be around to spoon-feed these little bots so that they could actually accommodate any new information. What an AI really will be, as to be sure many of those AI researchers actually said, is an intelligence comparable to humans, embedded in an artificial medium. So the traditional answer to the question of what it is to be an artificial intelligence is, well, of course, the Turing test. And that's to say, a being which can fake itself, pass itself off as a human. Turing's test comes out of this 1950 paper, which more or less launched the field of artificial intelligence by Alan Turing in the journal Mind, in which he canvassed, before publishing the paper, he canvassed the opinions of psychologists and philosophers about what intelligence might be in order to get a handle on the issue of what machine intelligence might be. But basically, he despaired at getting a clear and usable answer. So he proposed the imitation game as a way of short-circuiting the arguments. So in the imitation game, you have behind one curtain a woman, and behind another your computer with some program running it, and you have an interrogator who queries, asks questions of these two contestants, if you like. It's based on some kind of radio show. Various questions like, I don't know, about makeup, about whatever it is that might distinguish women from I don't know, male programmers of computers. The original game was between a man and a woman, of course. And the idea was that if, after 5 years, the interrogator...
5 minutes. 5 minutes.
5 years? Oh, okay. Sorry. I'm flying, semi-conscious. If after 5 minutes, quite right, the interrogator has no better idea who's who, so forth, then you pass the test. And Turing famously predicted that it would be passed by the year 2000, which apparently was not the case. There have been lots of very optimistic predictions in the history of AI. Perhaps the most infamous of those is Herbert Simon's from around 1960, when he predicted by the end of that decade there would be an AI writing literature of the quality of the Nobel Prize. That also did not come to pass. The only thing I'm sure of anyway, that actually has come to pass is World Championship Chess, out of Simon's list of 10 achievements. So there are lots of different aspects of an artificial intelligence that are pretty central, pretty key. Turing's test proposes natural language understanding as the criterion anyway, even if it isn't the center of the intelligence. It's the criterion that we ought to be using to judge whether we've achieved our goal or not. But these things are not exactly independent. Learning, understanding, planning, decision-making. I'll give you a trivial example, which I recently used in lecture. There are a couple of my students here who will remember it. He ate all the oysters using a spoon. There's a very simple sentence. It contains a dangling participle. The normal interpretation of it is not hard to come by. Somebody used a spoon to eat up all of the oysters around. But there's a deviant interpretation, which is that somebody or other has come across a batch of oysters, some of whom are using spoons. How odd. And those are the ones this guy decided to eat. And maybe left the other ones alone. Okay, well that's a stupid interpretation. None of you would succumb to that.
Machine right.
Sorry?
Machine right though.
Oh, indeed, a machine might. That's the point, of course. But what distinguishes those who interpret it correctly from those who don't? It's not machinery. It's background knowledge. We know the world doesn't contain oysters using spoons. The machine might not know that. The machine can learn that, if it can learn. So its natural language understanding isn't actually going to pass any of these tests that we might propose, unless, in fact, the intelligence that instantiates that understanding also possesses the capability of machine learning. Similar stories can be told about the other properties of an artificial intelligence. Basically, they all stand or fall together. Basically, you can't achieve one without the other. They have to be achieved simultaneously in the fullest and richest way, which would satisfy us that we indeed have achieved our goal of AI, if that's our goal. Okay, well, there are optimists around, still. Ray Kurzweil is one. He points out that with Moore's law, right, hardware power keeps growing exponentially year by year, and he draws graphs like this. So that's how much $1,000 will buy you in compute power per year. It's increasing exponentially. It has been, according to Moore's law, for some time, and plausibly it will for some time to come. And exponential growth is impressive, as we all know from Thomas Malthus.
It looks as though on the graph, I might be wrong, that it's 2040, that it's a human power. So I think that's the wrong.
Well, I got this off of Kurzweil's webpage. I'm not going to apologize for it. If it's wrong, then you blame him.
No, I'm talking about the text above it.
The text above it. Sorry, hardware power equals human brain power in 2019.
That's what
What text are you talking about?
It
Doesn't matter. I don't care. These are details. If it's 10 years here or there or whatever, it makes bloody little difference. Well, it might make difference to us, okay? If climate change, global warming really starts doing serious damage around here, then maybe it does make a difference, okay? But I'm not going to talk about these things. We can argue about them afterwards in the pub. That'll be fun. The main point here is that the computing power is growing fantastically fast. It's getting more and more powerful, impressively powerful. It's going to equal, in practical, accessible terms, human brain capacity soon, and greater than human capacity shortly thereafter. So why shouldn't an AI follow immediately? There are other people even more optimistic, like Henry Markham, says it'll happen within a decade. He's busy trying to develop a computer simulation of rat brains and stuff like that. And he's had some very modest success, which doesn't impress me that much thus far. Anyway, my point would be that the software problem is unsolved. One way to eliminate the software problem is indeed to finish human neuroscience. We really understand the human brain down to the atomic level inside the neuron, so we understand absolutely everything that's happening, and then build a computer simulation of that. Well, I agree, that would give us an artificial intelligence. No question about that. But I don't agree that that's around the corner, and I would take some persuading to change my mind about that. Okay, so anyway, I'm just going to talk from my bailiwick, my point of view, AI. Not neuroscience. I don't know very much about neuroscience, so I won't pretend to. I just remain skeptical. The strong AI thesis, that's a name that was given by an antagonist of artificial intelligence, one of my professors at Berkeley, John Searle, in this paper, Minds, Brains, and Programs. It basically encapsulates what AI is about. So the idea is or one idea anyway, is that we can enumerate all Turing machines, all possible Turing machines. That, in fact, is something that Turing proved in his 37 paper. So we can imagine enumerating them from, if you're going to do that, the only plausible way of doing it is basically from simplest to most complex. Well, there's no most complex. Simpler to more complex, and never-ending enumeration. So we lay them out, Turing machine 1, Turing machine 2, etc. It's a very boring thing to do. I don't really encourage you to try. But in principle, one can do this. Now, if an AI is possible, at least one of these things is going to be an AI. It's going to be a program that could run a robot that has artificial intelligence. So among the list of all possible Turing machines are all possible intelligences. And towards the beginning, you'll find me. And somewhere a good deal further out, you'll find the young Einstein. And undoubtedly, there are lots of weird aliens and other critters hanging out there somewhere here on the list. So the question I'm presenting tonight, and also I'm answering it. You might not believe my answer, but I'll still answer it. Is whether it's ethical to explore the farther ranges of this particular enumeration. A useful beginning point is Joseph Eisenbaum's computer program, Eliza. This is actually one of the few programs that arguably has passed the Turing test. It's an incredibly trivial natural language program. I think it was something like 500 lines of code or something like that. And what it's illustrating in the dialogue, which you probably shouldn't bother reading, is the way it passed the Turing test. It's a dialogue I actually ran with it just to generate an example. So the story, according to Weizenbaum, is that this was back in the days of time-shared machines. And he wrote this program, and he left his terminal logged on to the program, and the secretary came in one morning and started typing away at it, thinking that she was communicating with him logged on from home, and asked him various questions, and was confused, thinking that she indeed was communicating with Joe Weizenbaum, when in fact she was communicating with this program. Okay, that's an unfair version of the Turing test, where the person starts out believing that we're talking with a human. Okay, but still, it's one of the few instances where anybody was fooled by any program in any interesting way. Now, Weizenbaum wasn't exactly impressed by this. Actually, he started to tear his hair out when he discovered this. His secretary turned out liked, after she found out his program, she liked unburdening herself to this stupid computer program. And Weizenbaum wasn't impressed with that. And indeed, lots of people apparently enjoyed doing this. And eventually, a psychotherapist picked up the program and turned it into what's now known as doctrine, throwing in Rogerian concepts into the mix of the little phrases and whatever that the program used in order to carry along the dialogue and make it more beguiling and more confusing for non-computer scientists. Or also those who don't understand grammar, because if you go back and look at my example, it's quite typical that towards the end of some communication it starts getting its grammar stuffed up. Okay, anyway, this led Weizenbaum to generate an anti-artificial intelligence argument. And this is the argument. It should seem familiar to you. A real AI would be indeed an autonomous intelligent agent. By definition, it would be out of our control. It won't be sharing our motives, our constraints, our ethics. Furthermore, there's no obvious upper bound to intelligence. Perhaps there's no upper bound at all. So when our interests and that of the AI conflicts, guess who loses? Conclusion, Korb's research is unethical. Now, of course, you've heard versions of that. You've heard even more impressive versions of that. I mean, the Singularity Summit is named after a version of that argument, basically. So I'll just rephrase that argument for you. So recalling that intelligence can be enumerated in our list of Turing machines from simpler to more complex, dumber to smarter without limit, right? Well, we're somewhere near the beginning of that list. What about artificial intelligence? Well, if artificial intelligence is comparable to human intelligence, then it's near the beginning of that list too, so big deal. On the other hand, like I said, there isn't any limit to that list, and there's no obvious limit to the degree of intelligence that an artificial intelligence can attain. So once we get a stupid little AI that's comparable to us, what's it going to do? Well, presumably, at least it can look at itself and figure out how to improve itself. Once it's figured out how to improve itself, it doesn't take too long to communicate those improvements to others of its kind. It does so at the speed of light. So, AI self-improvement is a lot different from human self-improvement. It's a lot faster, it's a lot more universal, a lot more egalitarian, a lot more unconstrained, a lot less limited. So this is where the singularity comes from. As soon as we get any general intelligence in an artificial agent, then we get something that's more impressive. By recursion, we get an intelligence that's very substantially greater than our own. So Weizenbaum's argument is correct. I am evil. Okay, now I begin my rebuttal. Here's my proposition. My proposal, really, is that AI research is ethical if and only if AI research leads to an ethical AI. So what is an ethical AI? And how do we get there? Let's begin with Asimovs Laws of robotics. They're, of course, very well known. Very almost revered in the science fiction community. So what are the laws? A robot, this is my own version, slight paraphrase. A robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. 2, a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings. 3, a robot must protect its own existence. Now there's a meta law, the precedence order here, saying that when there's any conflict, right, the lower numbers win out. So avoiding harm to humans is the paramount law. Subsequently, and not irrelevantly, there was introduced the 0th law that robots must not harm humanity as a whole. So those are Asimov's laws. Now, assuming that we can get robots to obey these laws, then our problems are over. They would keep us safe. They would allow for, at any rate, AI research to be ethical, because at least it wouldn't be putting us in danger. Yes?
Are you proposing assassination robots to get rid of dangerous individuals?
Am I proposing the assassination of robots?
Robots must not harm humanity as a whole. They protect humanity as a whole and get rid of and so I deal with an individual.
Are you supposing that I'm endorsing these laws? I'm only presenting them. Now here's a relevant point. Asimov was able to write all of these magnificent and lengthy stories because there are so many ways these laws can go awry. And that's where the 0th law came from. It came from a hole at the center of the other 3 laws. I'm going to rewrite these laws in slightly different language. A subhuman may not injure a real human or through inaction allow a real human being to come to harm. Subhumans must obey the orders given to it by real humans. A subhuman must protect itself as it would any other piece of property owned by real humans. Those are Asimov's laws.
Later, did you talk about the corresponding case for superhumans?
I don't think there is a corresponding case for superhumans. I think this is the corresponding case, if you like. This is unethical AI, and that's really the point. Good luck to us if these guys happen to be superhuman, which they will be. We're trying to impose slavery on being superior to ourselves. It seems to me that I could write some pretty good Hollywood stories about that. But not very good AI research. So what I propose instead of Asimovs Laws is that we build an ethical AI. Not an enslaved AI, an ethical AI. An AI that actually takes ethics seriously. That decides its behavior based on the ethical merit or demerit of the different actions available to it. That's what an ethical AI would be. Why can't we do that instead of just make slaves? So what the hell am I talking about? What is any of that? Well, there are lots of things it could mean. These are 4 prominent candidates for ethical systems, all of them stemming from ancient Greek philosophy, in fact. Deontological systems, well, okay, that really stems from religion, I should say. Deontological systems, those are simply rules of behavior. Asimovs Laws are examples of that. The laws are telling the robots how they should behave. Those are deontic laws. Of course, Moses' commandments are another example. There are many, many other examples. I'm not going to dwell on them. Virtue ethics, that's a little bit different. It's Aristotle's view of ethics and many of the Greeks, actually. The idea there being that if you characterize what it is to be a person of good character, then instantiating that makes you ethical. So being honest, having integrity, things like that. Egoism also comes from ancient Greece. This is my version of egoism, so I like throwing things into formulas so that I can eventually stick them into AI programs, of course. So what this formula says, I've translated into English, it says that there's some action A which you're contemplating. In order to decide whether or not to do it, you compute this thing over on the right, which is the probability-weighted utility of the outcomes of that action. So if you're looking to perform some action, the very act that you're contemplating will influence the probability of certain outcomes. So you look at that probability distribution and you use that to weight the benefits to yourself. So you add that all up, you do that for all the actions available to you, and then you choose the action that maximizes that result. So you choose the action that benefits yourself the most, probably. Okay, so that's egoism. Utilitarianism, which is what I actually endorse, is doing the same thing, except that we throw in a couple of, well, we throw in all of these summands. I is ranging over other intelligent agents in the population. So instead of doing that action which maximizes probably the expected value of your utilities, of benefits to you, you perform that action which maximizes the community, the global expected utility. That's utilitarianism in a nutshell. It's endorsed by many people. It's a very popular point of view, but it's hardly universal. There are lots and lots of arguments that you can throw at me, that I can throw back at you, for and against. I'm not going to dwell on those arguments here. If you want to argue about it later, I will, or I can give you references. Indeed, a book of my own that I'm working on at the moment takes this up, and it's on the reference list at the end. Okay, but anyway, we have these 4 systems, and if we were able to implement, well, at least 3 of them, the third one is just selfishness. That's not a very noble concept. But anyway, if we could implement any of 1, 2, or 4 in our AI systems, then at least arguably we'd be in a position of being able to pursue AI ethically, because we'd have a realistic chance of achieving an ethical AI. But there are some problems. 1, 2, and 3 really shouldn't be implemented. 3 because that's just the Hollywood dream. Robots running rampant over the earth, smashing us, nuking us, and basically obliterating our civilization. Okay, 1 and 2. 1 and 2 must not be implemented because they require natural language understanding. So what? I mean, if we're implementing an AI, we're going to have natural language understanding. The problem is that it requires natural language understanding first. Because these deontic rules, these virtues, they're only accessible as far as we know in natural language. We cannot implement them in an AI unless that AI can understand what the hell we're implementing. I mean, that's one of the things that's really missing from Asimov's stories. Of course, it's not very technical, but it's just magic. You get the rules into the brains, the positronic brains, and all of a sudden they run around not hurting humans anymore. But how do you do that? A precondition for doing it is that they understand natural language understanding. As soon as they understand natural language understanding, they are problem solved, because, like I said, those things are all equivalent. You can't have natural language understanding without machine learning. You can't have machine learning without decision making, etc., etc. All of those things are there then, by presupposition of implementing ethics this way. And that means that the singularity is off and running. So we have an AI before we have ethical AI, and we cannot do that. So 4 is the only serious option available. Luckily, 4 is both ethical and technologically feasible. So that, in fact, is what a lot of my research is about. It's about Bayesian networks, which are the key technical approach to implementing utilitarianism. It does not require natural language understanding to make progress on implementing utilitarianism. What it requires is stuff like that. That's just a really simple Bayesian decision network. I've just described its basic elements. But if you're interested in the technology, a good starting point for that is Judea Pearl's 1988 book, Probabilistic Reasoning in Intelligent Systems, which was, it's kind of like the Bible of Bayesian nets. It's what really stirred the imagination of a lot of AI researchers, including me. And it was a direct cause of my returning to finish my PhD. Anyway, in this Bayesian net we have nodes, which are representing random variables. These are conditional probability tables. It's specifically about reasoning under uncertainty. It's specifically about modeling stochastic processes, if you like, in the real world. So the conditional probabilities can be used to automatically update the network. When you learn that somebody has a fever, you update the probability they have flu automatically. It's operating Bayes' theorem across the network. So the technology is all about that. But in addition, in this particular kind of extension to Bayesian networks, called decision networks, we have a utility node, which reports the utility to, presumably here, the decision maker, the utility of different possible joint states of its parents, its parent nodes. So if there's a fever later condition and a reaction condition, then the utility is negative 50, whatever. And then we also have decision nodes, in this case just one, where you're trying to decide whether to take an aspirin or not. So the way you operate this in order to actually make a decision is you instantiate whatever you know about the world in these so-called chance nodes, you instrument it with your utility function, and then you instantiate this decision node in its different possible ways. In this case it's binary. You either take aspirin or you don't take aspirin. So each time you instantiate it, there's a probabilistic updating that takes place. You get a probability distribution over this utility node, and you can compute the expected utility of that particular action. And then you maximize it, just like I was saying. The only difference you'll find between this in utilitarianism, this being just a simple example of what's commonly done in this branch of artificial intelligence. The only difference is that they're all talking about selfish agents, not utilitarian agents. But that's technologically, it's a trivial switchover. Well, maybe not trivial. Technologically, it's a generalization that I'm aiming for. At least programmatically, it's trivial. Okay, so this technology has been flourishing the past 20 years. It has an awful lot of potential, and it makes it clear that it's technologically feasible to implement a utilitarian artificial agent. So, in my view, AIs are at least, well, they're potential. They're only potential. I started out being very pessimistic about when it might happen. I think, disregarding the possibilities that neuroscience might present to us, it's at least a multiple hundred-year community endeavor, assuming that the sciences involved do not undergo great dislocation, say, sometime in the mid-century that we're in. Perhaps with the help of neuroscience it would be faster. If we could do it really fast, it might actually help us cope with the problems that we can see on the horizon. But we do have to build it first. What I mean is, some other people might have different purposes in mind for their artificial intelligences and not be all that interested in building an ethical AI. So we have to build it first, and we have to implement it ethically. Otherwise, we'll be in big trouble. So whether it's dystopia or utopia depends in part on how we go about building our AI. So in conclusion, I'd just like to say that I'm hopeful, but not optimistic. Thank you.
We do have time for questions.
Sure.
Plenty of time.
Okay, let's take questions then.
Traditional utilitarianism from Bentham onwards does actually have the ontological principles of felicity.
Of what?
Of felicity. The famous quote being felicity is the desire of all men. But the idea is that the utilitarian judgment, what is utility, is effectively chosen line of pain. And if you actually follow the utilitarian argument to its logical conclusion, then you'll find that non-human life forms also to be included in that equation.
I agree. As far as principles go, I mean, there's some dispute within the utilitarian church. There's sectarianism. So you have rule utilitarians and act utilitarians, and this utilitarian and that utilitarian. But act utilitarianism is more or less what I'm talking about here, more or less what we have as potentially implemented technologically.
The various attempts at the moment to build AIs, how many of these would be ethical by your standards?
Mine. I like easy questions. Yeah.
Assuming 10, 20 years from now, these things get built with the Bayesian networks and so forth, presumably the substrate would be nowadays. Okay. And then
I don't presume that, maybe.
Well, it seems plausible. And then I'm going to cosmic rays, that's the circuitry, and then what?
Well, what happens when your circuitry gets zapped? Ouch! I didn't want that. I mean, what can you say? You do what you can to minimize negative consequences. I am a utilitarian. That's what I believe. And obviously, we don't anticipate all possible outcomes.
Would you consider a volition-based AI which would somehow figure out what humans want and substitute that for a virtue-based AI? Do you think that has any possibility of working?
Anticipating what humans want. Why would they bother anticipating what? Well, I guess utilitarians in general, they're looking at the consequences of their actions for themselves, for others. So certainly it's part of the moral obligation of utilitarianism to consider what other people want. Okay. So I am talking about that, yes.
Have you followed the Singularity Institute's friendly AI thesis, and could you comment on it?
I haven't really studied that. I've printed it off. It's like many things. I print it off and carry it around in order to punish me until I study it. But I haven't actually read more than the first few pages of it. I intend to get to it because I want to write this up and it won't be complete without it.
Do you think AI will emerge on the internet as kind of by collective intelligence?
You mean by magic?
No, by collective intelligence and maybe a maturation of the semantic web with lots of AI agents running around?
Well,
it makes more sense. It's a power. You like treat the internet as an organism.
I don't think AI is going to happen by accident. I guess that's my short answer. The idea that it'll happen by accident, I think, is, I mean, that's like Doug Lennett's psych project, where you just pour things in until it heats up and turns into an AI. And that was also a Frank Herbert story about the moon is a harsh mistress or something like that. But it's just rubbish. I mean, come on, let's be real. We're either going to design it or we're not going to get it. Yep, back there.
Second reference, second book, Evolving Ethics and Science of Good and Evil.
Yeah.
Did you intend to make a play on words about Sherman's book?
About whose book?
Michael Sherman wrote a book called The Science of Good and Evil.
I suppose it comes from Nietzsche, actually.
Okay.
So we're both thieves. Yep.
I have a question about what you make of evolutionary origins of pleasure and pain, and how an AI that would use the utilitarian principle of maximizing the sum of all pleasure minimizing the sum of all pains over all human beings, wouldn't that not just be playing to our evolved, how can I say, drives, without taking into account what these evolved drives were aiming at, namely survival, so on and so on?
I don't know that it fails to take that into account. Presumably, our evolved utility structure does take that into account. After all, it evolved.
What I'm talking about is, that there's one saying that goes, don't follow in the footsteps of the wise, seek what they thought. And by implementing a utilitarian principle like this, you would merely be following in the footsteps. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't have a better option, frankly. If you can come up with one, let me know. I'm just what I am, and I evolve.
I wonder, is it possible, do you think, to devise an artificial intelligence which fulfills all the four criteria in your circle without it having agency, without it having a moral sense of itself and self-consciousness? And you've got blind option.
Mind-body problem, zombies, all of this stuff. Well, I'm a functionalist, so I guess I don't really believe in zombies. So I guess my inclination, just to give you an answer, is to say, no, it's going to have to be conscious. But I can't give you a serious argument for that because, anyway, I guess I could. It takes so long. Yeah. I prefer to evade.
What weight would utilitarian AI give itself as an agent?
Sorry? Start again, please.
What weight would a utilitarian AI give itself as an agent in consideration if it considered itself to be the same probability, same importance as a human? If, say, 5 humans were to die in trying to destroy this AI, would it kill itself?
Under what circumstances would it kill itself?
Well, if it considers itself to be more important than a human, then how more important? Then it becomes an egoist.
Yeah, these are very sticky questions, and I'm not going to pretend to have pat answers about them. Personally, I think that the richness of the mental life of humans is beyond that of, say, flies, or worms, or trees. And that's worth taking into account. On the other hand, as the gentleman in the rear suggested, flies and worms, at least, have neural systems, and they shouldn't be entirely disregarded. So I guess we're in that position ourselves, right? And how do we judge matters? Well, we're happy to eat a lot of these animals that we consider ourselves to be superior to. On the other hand, we do have laws and arguments about the rights of animals. So it isn't just open slather. And I suppose our descendants, the robots, will think similarly.
Doesn't that undermine your whole thesis that in the future these robots become so advanced to us, and the technology shows that this is definitely an option. So if they become so superior to us, couldn't they then ethically, by their standards, just dismiss humanity so insignificant that their value is so much less?
Why do you say by their standards?
Sorry?
Why do you say by their standards?
Yeah, but they have their own ethics.
It's the very same ethics I'm talking about. It'll be by my standards as well.
Yeah, but they could have a weighting for their vast numbers and the importance of each of their units. And then if there's a conflict between their value or their...
Look, if humanity is standing in the way of robot progress centuries from now, if seriously humanity is standing in the way, then maybe the robot should shove humanity aside. Should. Should. No, it's not undermining. I'm accepting that conclusion. You're not, I am.
In some ways, you're saying it's going to take us a century, maybe more, to create an AI. We are trying to do our best to make it ethical. It only works if we are the first and the only one to create it. And ultimately, even an ethical robot may decide that it doesn't want humanity. Why bother? I mean, it's not a very positive end result.
Well, look, that end result is only one of many possible results. I don't think it's at all a probable outcome that a large population of robots would decide that even though they're hugely superior to humanity, intellectually, technologically, and culturally, and so on, that humanity is actually an impediment to them and has to be eliminated. That just strikes me as an absurd sort of result. It's possible, and if it happens, then it happens. Yeah.
But we're still reasonably intelligent. At some point, aren't we going to realize we better make sure that we are not an impediment to robot development? And get out of the way
That might be a
ourselves?
wise decision, you know?
Just sort of step aside and do our thing over here?
Indeed. I mean, presumably, our having developed robots doesn't mean we cannot make decisions like that. Why are the apocalyptic scenarios? It's bizarre. If we build robots that are ethical and have this sort of intelligence, they'll be able to help us immensely. That's the main outcome that I envision.
I suppose we're just a bit confused about your utility function and how you measure it.
Yes, well, I haven't exactly specified it. I'm leaving it open. Yeah. I mean, those are really messy ethical waters.
But as it stands, it sounds like the minute of one of these robots appears, we come to the West, take a hefty proportion of our wealth and redistribute to the third world.
Okay, well, there are all kinds of scenarios. I guess I don't care to speculate about them too much. It's fairly pointless. I mean, we're talking about, I mean, after all, part of the point of dubbing this sort of thing the singularity is to point out there's a kind of event horizon associated with it, and once you get these really intelligent beings there that are exponentially or super exponentially improving their abilities, our ability to predict what happens, right, basically drops to nil. So I really don't see the point of this sort of scenario bashing.
So we should be discussing before we get to that point, right?
Discussing things we can't possibly envision. Well, fine.
the risk that, I mean, this is a fundamental point, and future politics and future wars will be on this very point. So it's critical. I've had bashings with Eliza in the US on this point, and we've been passionate at each other.
I believe that.
And this is how wars start, right? They start usually with an intellectual dialogue in a handful of people with passionate disagreements. This point is critical. Is friendly AI possible or not? Personally,
Well, of course I'm arguing that it's possible.
Dangerous delusion.
I am arguing that it's possible.
Okay.
You're arguing that I'm delusional.
Yes, I think you're deluded. And it's a dangerous delusion.
Well, I am only saying possible. I'm not even saying probable. But I think the technology is the technological path ahead of us is reasonably clear, and it can achieve the aim. Whether it will or not is really an open question.
I just wanted to suggest a paper that touches on the question of how far we can see beyond this so-called singularity by Dr. Stephen Omohundro. It's called The Nature of Self-Improving Artificial Intelligences. And there are some things we can say about them.
I'm sure.
And it's actually quite interesting. So just wanted to make that.
Thanks.
I guess everyone to contribute to this. How do we do that? What would be like the best
Contribute to what?
Creating a friendly AI. How do we help?
See me for an honest project later. I'll be happy to start you on the path. Absolutely. I'm not joking about that.
Let's say this an AI had 100 times the intelligence of a human. How would you program the utility function with compared to the relative?
I think by that time I wouldn't be programming the utility function. I'd be programming the utility function early on. I'd be making sure it's not just a selfish utility function, but actually takes into account a reasonable model of the inner life of the different agents that the robot is interacting with, and does a reasonable job of maximizing a global utility. And then it's out of my hands. And if it is ethical, right, then its progeny, we can hope, will also be ethical.
Where are we at with developing a theory around having an AI only modulate its utility function in such a way that it is ethically changing its utility function?
Well, look, we're just at the very beginnings of this.
So
I started out, relative to Ray Kurzweil and Herbert Simon and those sorts, I'm really skeptical. I think we have a long, long way to go. And making sense out of things like machine learning, machine induction, those are things we've made a lot of progress on in 20, 30 years, but my God, we've got a long ways to go. We don't understand these things. Philosophically, we do not understand the theories of machine learning, let alone ethics. Ethics is really hard, okay? All right, we're just kind of groping around in the dark. And, you know, we have technology that's coming together, and we have ideas, and we have ethical arguments, and we have debates with people who think we're on our way to Armageddon. And, you know, hopefully over the long term of hundreds of years, we'll make progress. That's where I'm at with this. I certainly don't think AI wars are imminent, because AI is not imminent. So you can't have a war over a science fiction concept. I hope not. Religion, okay. You can't have wars, though. I withdraw my remark.
Can you just expand a bit more on why you think this multi-hundred years? Why do you think are the big impediments?
Well, software, okay? Just look at the history of software. I mean, there's been huge progress, right? Somebody invented macro languages. And then somebody invented higher level programming languages like Fortran and Lisp. And then somebody came along and said, let's have objects and classes and inheritance. And what's the result of all that been? Well, instead of having programs with a few thousand lines of code fall apart because nobody can understand them, now we have millions of lines of code. And that falls apart. We can't write large-scale software that works. How the hell are we going to write an AI that works? being optimistic about it is, to my mind, lunacy. It's just lunacy. Optimistic in this near term of 10, 20 years, okay? Hundreds of years, okay, well, all kinds of things can happen. We'll have nanotechnology, we'll have neuroscience, we'll have all kinds of models that we can follow, and maybe even we'll know how to write software by that.
Is there not now already existing software for coding robust and self-directing programs?
Trivial one, sure.
Yeah, small ones now.
Yeah. Okay, but I could write trivial programs 30 years ago, no problem.
Do you think it'd be possible to evolve an ethical AI?
I think evolution can certainly play a role. Yeah. And as the title of that book suggests, I'm looking at things like that. I trust evolution more than I do programs.
So is your model a hybrid between evolutionary artificial intelligence and
My model of an ethical AI? I don't have a model of an ethical AI, really. I mean, the technology that we're... I really don't have an answer to that question. I don't know how it's going to come about, but certainly evolutionary algorithms can play an important role, I'm sure of that. That's all I'll say. That's enough of me spouting off. You have some panels so that other people can spout off too, right?
You're in.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we've got a panel with, at the moment, 2 people on it because one person can't make it. Now, who in here?
Let's open it up. 2 is too few.
Yeah, 2 is too few. So, the
about
obvious
my
question would be,
Antagonists?
okay, Hugo, would you like to join this panel? It's about AI roadmaps.
If I come down, there will be sparks.
We like sparks.
See my context. The US is ahead by 5 years and it's already passionate. It is set amongst the intellectuals. The war has already started. So if I come down,
US is ahead of whom?
This issue is critical. Is friendly AI possible or not? If you're right, fine, there's no problem. So it's a critical issue.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, we should talk about it.
Yeah, let's talk about it. It's critical to talk about it. Who else?
There's no really PhD AI. Is there any other AI researchers out there? No.